Hello YouTube, today here I have the AO Quadrum 3 deck, as you can probably tell by the title. This is my first ever in-depth review, so if you're watching and you want to keep watching, please grab yourself a drink. It's probably going to be quite lengthy. I'm going to mix it up with this kind of audio and video pictures sort of style, so please grab yourself a drink. You've been warned. I want to start out with how awesome boxed dropouts are. This is the first time I've been riding box dropouts and actually owning it. I've tried it here and there before when they first came about, but never actually owned it. And for me, it's just like riding pegs. Something I don't really grasp though is pegs about 4 or 5 years ago were frowned upon. They were people thought it was a cheat way of grinding feebles and locking into ledges, etc. And the fact that I find box dropouts just the same as riding pegs, so like 5.0 ice pick, I find them exactly the same. They feel the same, they ride the same, they grind the same. They might have their slight differences, but for me it's basically the same. And to know that it was uncool and now it's like a fashion statement to have box dropouts because it's easier to do feeble grinds and lock into grinds. Yeah, I just want to make it known that that's completely bizarre for someone who's been riding as long as I have, 10 years or so. On the fact that 5.0s and ice picks and with box dropouts, etc., it is really cool to actually have it. Not only is it feels better, it's actually safer, I find. If you've ever had pegs back in 4 or 5 years ago, or if you're still riding pegs, they kind of get sharded up and sharp on the ends after a while, and if you've ever landed on it, you know how nasty it is to kind of fall on them. It's kind of disgusting in a way. But now it's like part of the deck. It's not like a protruding piece of equipment that's gonna stab you or hurt you. It's actually quite comfortable. I've been doing my 5.0 grinds and my 50/50s and not actually felt any risk when doing them. It is actually quite comfortable. I haven't been riding front pegs. I put them on recently, but with box dropouts and having that wider bottom, you can actually lock into double peg grind. It's a 50/50, which is what people call it, but it feels exactly the same as a double peg grind. But yeah, the whole aspect of it being safer is 100% amazing. One problem I did come into, talking of the box dropouts, is where the deck is quite thin on the top and it's quite thin on the bottom, to be honest. The actual horizontal piece of metal running through the deck is actually quite thin, and where the the insert for the box dropout, so it doesn't bend as much, it still bends. I've managed to actually bend part of the deck up. How I manage this, I don't know. I must have hit a ledge or something. But it's also dented some of the insert. So where my hex nut would go and where my axle would go, I think I was trying to take out my back wheel one time to adjust my brake and everything, and my axle wouldn't come out because it had worn away. It's the same problem with some aluminium pegs. Because they're so thick, you can't pull the axle out. I think the easy way around of fixing this is just to kind of make the hex nut shape in the insert to be right in the actual insert, and then have a bigger opening like a traditional kind of steel peg. Have it more open. Only a little bit, because obviously you still want the structural strength of the actual insert there. That's why it's there, to protect the dropout from bending as much. And I guess it's a cheaper way of doing it as well. Moving on, something else I noticed about this deck was the width. This is 5.2 wide, I believe. I haven't actually measured it, but it's definitely quite a large upgrade if you're coming from something like 4 inches, etc. Because before I was riding this, I was riding a Phase 2, like the old Razor Phase 2 deck. They had it cheap somewhere, so I just thought, why not? But that's only 4.2 wide, I think. So if you're upgrading like a whole inch wider, it's definitely beneficial. Like, I didn't think it would be that much of a difference because I've ridden 4.5 wide for so long, and coming from 4 to 4.5 is not much of a difference. You can't really tell. You don't think it affects your riding, but I personally think it does now. You know, after all these years, I think it probably did affect my riding somewhat, especially now being a bit older and I'm actually quite a bit larger. The extra foot space and the extra room wider is definitely beneficial. It's definitely been more comfortable, especially with the 5.0s and 50/50s or ice picks or double pegs. It's definitely nice to kind of sit on it a bit more. With pegs, you kind of have to balance on 4 wide, and it's kind of a battle to kind of lean onto it. But with the wider deck on top as well, you actually like stand on top of it. You can actually balance a bit more. Now I'm actually talking about it, I realise how much more I actually do like the wider deck. Also having that wider bottom as well, like traditionally, especially with coming from Phase 2, the actual width on the bottom is only like 4 inches. It's hardly anything. And for board slides, oh god, it makes such a difference. I've enjoyed my board slides a lot more. I've even been doing no-handed board slides as well. I even got front side no-handed board slides. I think it was yesterday or the day before, but yeah, I'll try and show it on the screen for you now. But it's the balance point on it is just on point. You can get into a board slide and just stick to the rail basically, and that's really been enjoyable. For any rider who likes their board slides and grinds, this is definitely something you should consider when buying any deck, is knowing how wide it is on the bottom as well. I definitely think it's a bit less than the 5.2 wide on the bottom, but it's wider than 4 inches, which is what I'm used to. You know, I've ridden the old Mad Gear decks and everything, and that's traditionally how wide I would go on the bottom. But yeah, the wider bottom has definitely, it's just really fun, like being able to do board slides forever. As you can tell by the footage you're probably watching now, I've been doing loads of board slides, and that's because of this deck. If it wasn't for this deck, I wouldn't be doing half of these grinds, period. That's that. Something else about the deck is the head tube, and when I first saw it, I was kind of a bit worried. Like, I remember seeing the pictures when this deck was released, and it looked a bit flimsy along that head tube part. I don't think it's actually that bad. I don't think you should, if you're gonna think about this deck, the head tube is really not much of a hindrance. I've not noticed any flexing or any cracks in it, or I've not felt the head tube angle move much. But yeah, it just feels really strong for what it looks like. It's actually really strong. It's actually, from the side, it looks quite flimsy, and I think that's why I got that initial thought that it was flimsy. But when you're actually standing on it, the head tube is actually quite wide on the deck. It covers at least half of it, which just means better strength. It's got that strength along the width of the deck as well as how long it is as well, or how thick it is. But yeah, the head tube, if you're going to think about getting this deck, it's nothing to worry about, I would think. I've not seen anyone break them yet. I think it'll be a good time yet until they do, but I think the welds will probably give up before the actual strength of the head tube, and especially being forged, as I think it is forged. I'm not a complete engineer, but I'm pretty sure that the whole head tube is forged. It's only welded to the deck at the bottom, like on the actual extrusion of the deck. Moving along the actual deck itself, you have this Fender. Oh, the Fender. I've always liked the look of Fenders. I've always wanted to try one, so when I got this deck, I was like, right, I'll give it a chance, because I've always ridden brakes ever since the old Razor days. I never went brakeless. I always wanted that brake for manuals or tyre taps. But I thought I'd give it a try. Now, the Fender is a double fender, and basically what that means is that the bottom part, like, it goes right through the deck. So you have a little bit of a fender on the bottom and the top. And this is where I found this Fender a little weird. I was tempted just to cut the bottom piece off, but I thought it would just kind of make it bendy and less rigid, so I didn't bother. But basically my thought of this bottom piece, it ruined it for me, to be honest. But we'll talk about the top part first. Now, the top part, when I first saw a Fender, I'll try and find a picture of it. I think it was Maddis Cook. He had like a whole fixed brake, like it was completely closed off. It like covered his whole wheel, and basically it works like any other Fender. It doesn't touch the wheel, but you're able to stand on it, meaning that you can like manual and not brake, if that makes sense. It's like a brake manual, but you're not braking because it's a Fender. And that's what I thought a Fender was actually for. When I first rode this Fender, I kept going to stand on it, but I kept standing like on the Fender and my wheel. It was really bizarre. Like, I wanted to put my foot there, but I couldn't. And I think most of this is because I've ridden brakes for so long. But not only that, let's talk about the bottom piece, because this is where my biggest gripe with this Fender is because the bottom part, I can't, it's really hard to explain, but where the Fender is, because it's plastic, it's quite thick, and it makes it feel as if it's a wheel. Like when you're doing feeble grinds and you're up against the Fender, it feels like you're on like a 200mm wheel. It's ginormous. It feels really bizarre, especially when you're used to a certain deck length. It makes it feel like your deck is a lot shorter when you're doing a feeble grind. Yes, it's awesome, because, dude, I could grind forever and ever, because obviously there's no friction on the softer plastic of the wheel. You can just keep grinding and grinding, or the metal around the side of the wheel. It was really awesome to just keep sliding and sliding, but it felt really weird. There was quite a big learning curve to get around when using that Fender on the bottom. Personally, I just couldn't take it anymore. I rode the Fender for about a month, and then I was like, nope, right, I've got to get rid of it, because it just doesn't suit my style of riding. And I think that's what it really comes down to. If just because you're riding street or park or whatever stereotype of scootering you want to take, and where to put Cheddies or Fenders, it really comes down to what you like. Because I've always ridden brakes, and that's what I went back to. And the cool thing about this deck is the mounting holes are quite universal, and if not, you can always drill it out or try and bodge it up and try and put your own brake or Cheddy or whatever you like on there. But yeah, I went back to, I think it was a grit brake or something that I got years ago, but it's perfect. I couldn't want anything more or anything less. It feels so much better in feebles grinding against my wheel. Yeah, I don't grind as far, but just go a little faster or a little harder on your grind. You can really feel your grind more, I think, when you have no Fender. It's a bit safer, I guess you could say that. Not only that, it gets worse. The actual Fender on the bottom, the worst thing about it was when I would like go to do a feeble grind and try and get up against my wheel, and I would land on the actual fender. So not on the deck and grind against the fender, no, on the fender. So I wasn't like flat on the ledge, it was kind of like balancing on a small pin in a feeble grind. It was, yeah, that was probably the worst part of that Fender, was because it was such a steep learning curve to get into. I just kept landing on the actual Fender itself. I did take a little B-roll footage shot. I'll try and actually put it up for you, but that was the worst part about this Fender, was landing on the Fender. Yeah, it slid good, but like you could like slide for a long time, but it was just the actual landing on it. You know, it kind of raised you off the ledge a little bit. You were a bit higher, and then obviously it just, the balance was completely off, and you were like, whoa. You know, I nearly lost it when I first did it. I was confused. I thought I'd broken something. Or yeah, really bizarre that was. For construction of the deck, I think it's actually been done really well. It is a heavier deck. I can't remember the weight. You can probably go on the Volt Pro scooters and watch their like unboxing. They always weigh it and stuff. Or you can find it elsewhere. But the weight of the deck, I will say, is a lot heavier than most other decks. I think any boxed dropout deck is going to be a lot heavier, just by design. But to be honest, for what it is, it's actually quite light, and I've actually really enjoyed the weight of the scooter. It helps, you know, kind of control the scooter more. You might not think it, but you know, when you do a trick, say like a tail whip or a bri flip, you kind of feel your scooter more because there's so much more there. So, you know, I've not minded. You know, I've ridden many heavier scooters in the past, like the Micro XT. That is a really old scooter. I can't even remember when that got released. But yeah, that was really heavy. So, you know, for me, it didn't really bother me too much. And if anything, it does add to the strength. It does help, you know, make the scooter last longer, which I like. I don't like changing my scooter too much. I like to keep it the same for a good amount of time. Like now, you know, I haven't changed really my scooter other than pegs for 3 months. Like that's literally what I've ridden. Compatibility has been amazing as well. Like, to know that I could upgrade to bigger wheels is awesome. Again, the brake situation is awesome. The head tube length is quite universal as well. I find a lot of decks actually use that kind of standard. Coming from the Razor Phase 2, that head tube was ginormous, and I always find the District head tubes are also quite large as well, which means that you have to have longer forks and, you know, shims and SCS compatibility. It kind of gets a bit weird when companies do that. And I said this in my last small review of the Mad Gear clamp, that, you know, companies don't make their parts universal so that you can use this part from this company and that part from that company and put them together easily, like universal sort of standard. It's just not there too much in the scooter industry, but it is getting there. I am seeing, like this deck, it's got a nice universal kind of feel to it, and that's what is appealing for it. You know, if you're looking for a deck that's kind of compatible with most parts, this is your go-to. There's a lot of others out there, but this is one that hits it quite hard on the nail, so it's a good deck to get. So lastly, I want to speak about the general feel of the deck. I got the 20.5 length deck. I don't like anything larger than 21. It just doesn't feel right, especially with the height of my bars, etc. it just doesn't feel correct in a way. So I've just stuck with the smaller version, which I'm glad I did. But as you can see by the footage I'm putting up for you, it's been a breeze doing park tricks. We've had a recent refurbishment of Melksham Skate Park, and it's been amazing to do park tricks like whip turn downs, big airs, inverts, you name it. But also doing the street tricks has been awesome. I haven't been able to ride much street recently, but I still do the rails, I still do the grinds. It's amazing, like the amount of diversity that's there for this deck is amazing. You know, if you're an older rider like myself, you want that wider deck that's quite short as well, you know, 20.5. It's magnificent, you know, you can get on park, street, it's kind of all round. And I think recently there's been a lot of scooters that have come out that are quite all round, you know, it kind of caters for everyone's riding, not just a specific thing. And I think the box dropout thing should have happened years ago, because it is so nice having that reinforcement. You know, even if they didn't have box like square dropouts, even just having the aluminium insert on like cut dropouts would benefit a lot of people. It would just, you know, I always see kids with bent dropouts and stuff. The inserts are awesome. So AO, I know you're listening, so please, if you make a deck that's cut off, put aluminium inserts anyway. It's going to help. It's going to reinforce that dropout. You know, even since the Razor Pro model days, we've always had bent dropouts. Let's fix that. You know, having the inserts are going to help. Even if it's a cut dropout or a square dropout, it's going to help. So, yeah, the general feel, if you want a deck that's all round, this is a go-to, and the same with a lot of the other decks out there on the market now anyway. Something that I'd like to add about the whole box dropout peg situation is also the axles. Not having to swap axles out because they get bent because of pegs, etc. It's been a real good breeze. Like, I used to have 4 pegs on my scooter like years ago, and what would happen is that because my backside peg was actually on the bolt side and not the nut side, it would last longer, but then the front side peg, because it was on the nut side right on the thread of the actual bolt, it would snap or bend or something, and then you can't do your trick on your peg properly. So it is really nice being able to have the box drop out on the back, just so you can like not bend axles all the time, because that always happened to me, is bending axles after axles after axles. And you know, having them, this is just the back ones I'm talking about. So like, you know, the long axles that you used to get for 4 pegs, they weren't expensive, but it was annoying having to replace them all the time, and especially early on, because there was hardly any axles that you could get that were that long. You had to go to like a proper hardware store and try and find the right length axle, because you can't just use a threaded bolt. You can, but it's so weak, so it was hard trying to find the axles for it, which now with the box dropouts, you don't have to worry about it. You just have, you know, the inserts and the dropout, and it's all kind of reinforced in one. How I see it is like the aluminium insert for the box dropouts is just like the peg. You're literally just putting it inside the deck so it doesn't get ruined, etc. Kind of reminds me of the old crisp pegs that you used to get. It was like an aluminium peg, but then it had the chromoly on the outside. I think Aaron Branson pegs, if I'm correct. And then Crisp made them I can't remember. I just remember Aaron Branson pegs, and they had chromoly on the outside, and then like an aluminium insert. They were quite cool, but yeah, there's that. The actual wider bottom as well for 5.0 grinds is really good as well. I know some decks are technically wider on the 5.0. People call it the 5.0 space, especially Max Peters anyway. If you know Max Peters, go follow him. He's awesome. But yeah, the 5.0 space is more than comfortable, I find. Coming from pegs, it is basically identical. I think the 5.0 space is a little bit shorter than the standard like 2 inches of peg that I would say. I'm pretty sure most pegs are about 2 inches, so it's a little shorter. It's about 1.5 inches or something like that, or maybe just an inch, but it's more than enough. I can remember a lot of people used to do 5.0s on the Razer Pro models, so this is definitely an upgrade if you're coming from that. I just remembered the Tristan Anderman version of the deck, the signature deck. That would be the one that would benefit from the aluminium insert on the cut dropout. It would just be perfect after that, because that means that dropout won't bend or break, and it'd just be generally much stronger. Because again, like I said earlier, with the metal on the top and the bottom's quite thin, this dropout's not going to last on this one. So I can imagine an aluminium insert on this deck anyway that's cut off and makes it flush with the deck. It would just make it so much better, and the fact that it's got the hex nut shape where it's just all integrated, it would really benefit that. I just want to say a really big thank you for AO Scooters for sending out this Quadrum free for me to review for you guys. It's been really enjoyable actually riding this for a good while and actually giving my good honest opinion. Yes, they did send it out for me free of charge. I'm not just doing it to promote the product, I'm actually doing it because I feel like this deck is substantial. If you ever rode the older models of the Quadrum and the Sachem, you know that those were awful. Those didn't do too well. And this is a big improvement. I didn't even touch those other ones. I didn't even want to know about them because they just looked that bad. The flimsy head tubes and all the design behind it. But the Quadrum 3 has really been a leap forward, and I'm glad that I'm in the process of maybe even making it better. Not just to make AO scooters shine in glory, just in general. If other companies are listening to this video, good. This stuff needs to be listened to if we want this sport to progress, etc., etc. So yeah, congratulations to AO for actually making the Quadrum name better. We're at a point where it's like really good now. So yeah, this deck, it comes in 3 different sizes. I think I've been playing it through the whole video on and off of the specs and everything. I'll try and list as much as I can for you guys. But yeah, I really hope that you enjoyed this review. If you did, please let me know, because again, I'm struggling to think if I should actually keep going with these. I did this one because I wanted to, and especially getting the deck for free, I felt obliged to kind of do one anyway. So please leave the like or dislike and comment below if you actually want to get this deck or what you think is wrong with this deck. I'll try and get back to you. And AO will probably be looking at this review, so if you want to change anything, just put it in the comments below. I'm sure they might see it. If not, I'll try and pass the information on if many people comment the same thing, or you know the drill, So yeah, thank you very much for listening, and peace out. Keep shredding.